What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Lockdown 23-1. Yeah, I know. I took the stash a little too low yesterday, fellas. Little low, but it's alright. We're going to keep the show going. Don't mind the drop top on the mini-map here. But anyways, we are jumping back into courtroom, and if you are new to this channel, we talk about all things lockup and crime related. Everything you ever dreamed of. So don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, notification bell before you leave. You know, someone once told me that the people that hate you the most watch you the most. So you better be giving them a show. And that's what we're gonna do today, ladies and gentlemen. We're jumping back into the courtroom to witness a grown man cry and sob like a little baby. Mr. James Ball probably never in a million years thought he'd be in the courtroom facing some penitentiary time. Yet, here he is. Mr. Ball is in the courtroom for killing his brother-in-law, his wife's brother. A little fight took place between the two at a 4th of July party, and Mr. Ball decided to go upstairs and get himself a gun. Maybe because he was losing, maybe because it was his own house and the guy wasn't leaving. This is a crazy one, ladies and gentlemen. Buckle your seatbelt, get that stolen polo button up and the fresh pressed khakis ready. It's time to fight for our lives.
The matter People versus James Ball. It's on for sentencing today. My file reflects that James Ball previously entered a guilty plea to manslaughter in the second degree in violation of Penal Law Section 125.15 Subdivision 1 with an agreed upon sentence of no worse than an indeterminate sentence of 3 to 9 years, along with a waiver of appeal. I ordered the pre-sentence report. I have it. I reviewed it. I've also received a number of letters that have been submitted on behalf of Mr. Ball, on behalf of the Ross family. I read all of them, and I will make that part of today's record as well.
All right, so he pled guilty to second-degree manslaughter, facing a maximum of 3 to 9 years in prison, which is not too bad to individuals that's been locked up, you know, like me, been to prison 2 times. 9 years for accidentally or whatever the case is, taking a man's life is not that bad. With good time, you might be doing like 7. And that's if he's sentenced to the max. At least he knows that they ain't going to go no higher than 9. A lot of guys do not have that opportunity because they don't take plea bargains. They could go home that day or they could go to prison 70 years. That's scary. And another good thing that's going his way is a pre-sentence report. You know, that always works good for the people that ain't never had no kind of criminal record, because a pre-sentence report is pretty much a scoreboard to your past criminal charges. The more charges you have gives you more points on the pre-sentence report. The more points you have means the more time you're going to get sentenced to prison. So it doesn't always work out for everybody, especially the career criminals, but he ain't got no damn criminal record, man. He probably ain't never thought in a million years he'd be in front of a judge.
Bill Fitzpatrick is here on behalf of the people, as is Hannah Renna, Emma Rossi, Michael Spano, Bob Duncanson are here, along with James Ball, the defendant. The people move sentencing.
We do, Your Honor.
Would you like to be heard today, Bill?
Yes, Judge. Judge, this is literally one of those instances where every lawyer in this courtroom would rather be somewhere else.
Pardon me for interrupting you. Feel free to take off your mask, Bill. It makes it easier for everyone.
Thank you.
He was tired of that thing, just skipping through.
As I was saying, you know, if only there hadn't been that beating, if only he hadn't gone and gotten the gun, if only he called 911. And I don't know that he disagrees with me on that. I'm sure the defendant has gone through that in his own mind. But that's academic now, because Christopher Ross is dead. And this family has been ruined, torn asunder. That, you know, the relationship between the parties here, and I can't even imagine what the defendant's daughter is having to deal with, and she was forced to have to witness most of this the same. In any event, you know, oftentimes I stand here, Judge, and I'll ask you to look at the defendant's state of mind and the consequences of his actions. And when I talk about a defendant at sentencing, you know, this isn't a defendant where I'm going to stand in front of you and say, this is a bad guy. This is not a bad guy. This is a good guy. This is a teacher, father, husband. You know, he not perfect. Nobody is that I know.
But I still got to smoke.
And I know his counsel has worked hard to portray him in a positive light, and I'm not here to dispute any of that. But I
Man, this is the damn prosecutor speaking. I ain't never seen a prosecutor try to save someone from some smoke.
believe the grand jury's decision was supported by the evidence, and that's what I'd like to focus on. And briefly, there's no question the defendant deserves some consideration, and I think the people have given him that. He's entitled to that because, as we know, of the brutal assault that occurred just before this homicide occurred. I don't know what they were arguing about. I don't care what they were arguing about. They're both adults, and that's why we took a plea that we did and agreed to cap the possible sentence at 3 to 9.
Well, one's an adult. The other
So
one's
some
dead.
of the things about that night, Judge, are not in dispute. First of all, this was a family that, for all his faults, they loved Christopher Ross. I don't have any history of angst between the defendant and his brother-in-law before that night. His wife, Lori, certainly loved her brother. There was a lot of drinking that day, an awful lot of drinking, and
Never good.
that made some of these things inevitable about bad judgment being employed later in the evening.
Bad judgment, Bobo.
As I said, the
Bobby.
deceased and the defendant got into an argument. You've seen the pictures. The defendant got his butt kicked.
Yeah, he did.
It was
He did. Go Google.
brutal, savage, however you want to portray it. I'm sure Mike will do a better job than me.
Oh, Ross was
But-
getting a better hand.
After that,
Oh, watch your words, sir. Watch your words.
sorry, Judge, totally speaking to the mic.
Can you speak into the mic, sir?
At that point,
Ain't nothing changed.
things become a little more murky, but I think they're not indecipherable. Lori Ball, who clearly loved her husband and her brother, she does her best to de-escalate the situations. We all know that. And she apparently met with some initial success. The deceased is now outside with his sister. She's trying to get him home in a safe manner. Maybe as a compromise, he's going to sleep on the couch. Defendant is clearly upstairs. With all due respect to Lori, her version has changed what she initially told police from today. So I'm gonna leave that out of my description for the time being. Allison, who I alluded to earlier, the defendant's daughter, she's then 16 years old. She's the niece of the deceased, and she's awakened by all this, and she sees what's going on. If there's more than one victim here, it's certainly Allison. She goes back upstairs and she does one of these FaceTime things with a friend, and then she sees her dad retrieve a gun, and she says something very telling for a 16-year-old. She looks at her father and says, "Dad, don't do this, you're gonna go to jail." She knows that. And I don't know whether it's alcohol or rage or a combination of the two. He ignores her, and then her Facebook friend overhears the defendant make a prediction that Christopher Ross is gonna die. He then goes back downstairs, and here's why he deserves 3 to 9, Judge. 4 shots to the deceased. Now, I could suggest to you the order, but determining the order is, as we all know, we've all tried a lot of cases, it's pretty much impossible. But I'm gonna suggest to you that there is proof of what the last 2 shots were. So one shot is to the top of the left shoulder, and it's in a downward trajectory. Another shot is through his right bicep, and it travels across his body.
He shot him coming down the stairs.
And then what I believe are the final 2 shots. And these are clearly to the back.
Damn.
They enter below the right shoulder of the deceased, and they travel in a downward direction. And incidentally, Dr. Stoppinger said any one of the 4 could have been fatal. Why do I say the final 2? Number 1,
The angle.
Lori Ball has testified a number of times about this case, and she only heard 2 shots, and I believe her. Her brother was closer to her when the final 2 shots were fired. This is a .22 Ruger, doesn't make a lot of noise, it's more of a pop, pop kind of a sound. Number 2, the final 2 shots to the back, they're less than 2 inches apart. Now that suggests circumstantially, because this gun requires a trigger suppression for each shot, but it indicates very strongly, being less than 2 inches apart, that the deceased was immobile. It's not likely that this was the first shot, the second shot to the back, third shot over here, and then another shot to the back 2 inches from one. It's more likely that the deceased was immobilized when he was shot. Dr. Stoppiger has testified that both of these wounds to the back, unlike the other two wounds, had stippling, indicating, don't forget the deceased had no shirt on, indicating that they were discharged from anywhere from 2 inches to 2 feet away. That was his testimony in the grand jury.
2 inches to 2 feet. That's
And the
actually
fourth
kind
and
of
final
large
reason,
range.
Judge, and I believe those are the final two shots, are the defendant's own words. He gave a statement which was the source of litigation in front of Your Honor. He steadfastly denies shooting his brother-in-law in the back, and take him at his word during his interview. He doesn't believe that he shot him in the back, but clearly he did. There's no other shooters there. As horrible as it sounds, he fired twice, immobilized Mr. Ross, and then went over and executed him. And Judge, it's as simple as that. It's not because of his character. It's not because of the pain that this is going to cause the family, in addition to what they've already suffered. It's what he deserves. And I really think 3 to 9 is a more than fair sentence for somebody that, executes his brother-in-law. And I thank you for the opportunity to be heard.
That was a very elegant closing. Very elegant. Let's do a quick little courtroom analysis. Look at that damn 2022 Beam Cannon webcam. And those hand-whittled inmate tables are shining. Not to mention the Sector 9 declassified UFO surge protector. This courtroom's giving me multiverse vibes. I don't know what that even means, y'all. Don't mind me.
I have, Judge, and I've gone over it with Mr. Ball as well.
God, look at that mic. That thing's like a damn Mount Everest. Look at the length on this puppy here. Don't poke your eye out with that.
Thank you as well, Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Bobby, you love mics like that, don't you?
I have, Judge, and I've gone over it with Mr. Ball as well.
Very good. I'm sorry.
She needs to angle that damn. That's one of them things you put in the pipe to unclog it. Snakes.
Michael, would you like to be here?
I would, Judge.
You can take off the mask as well, please.
Thank you, Judge.
You're like, thank you.
Judge, we're asking you to sentence Mr. Ball to probation today. We're asking you to impose a 5-year probationary sentence, Judge.
Probation?
I believe it's appropriate in this case. I understand, Judge, especially after listening to Mr. Fitzpatrick, that you may have some reluctance in imposing that sentence, but it is an authorized sentence. The legislature has told us that for manslaughter in the second degree, the crime for which he pled guilty to, the crime for which the people graciously allowed him to plead guilty to, and I thank them for that, Judge. This was their call to reduce this to manslaughter in the second degree, based upon their review of all the facts and circumstances of this case. Judge, the legislature, by giving you that authority, is telling us that there are those cases, there are those homicide cases that warrant a probationary sentence.
That's an eye of intent right
you know,
there.
Again, Judge, I can understand your
Intent to smoke.
There's a young man who tragically lost his life here. The Ross family has been suffering for 5 years, and I expect they will continue to suffer for a very, very long time, possibly the rest of their lives. But I'm
Squeaky
asking you,
chair.
Judge, to look at the history and character of Mr. Ball, which I believe you have quite a bit of proof about his history and character. And I'm asking you to conclude, Judge, that confinement is not necessary to
There's a lot of drop
to
tops in
protect
the
the
room
public,
today.
when considering a sentence of probation. Does this person need to be confined to protect the public? And I think the answer to that, Judge, is clearly no. And again, you've got a lot of information available to you.
Look at the ear
I'd like
on
to
that
start
mask.
off by talking about remorse. I think there is just tons of proof
I
in
mean,
front of
mask
you
on that ear.
that he has remorse for this. Judge, I've known him now for 5 years. Met with him numerous times. This has always been an important case to me. I've met with Mr. Ball quite a few times. And I can tell you for the first year, we could barely get through a meeting without him crying. And who is he crying for? Of course he's crying a bit for himself.
Camera
But he also
quality's
cried for Chris
fantastic.
Ross. He cried for Chris Ross's mother. He cried for his own daughters, his own wife. He knew what he had done. He took responsibility for it, Judge, when he came in here and he pled guilty to recklessly causing this death. So I think you have plenty of reason, Judge, to conclude that he is remorseful. You have all those character letters that I sent you, Judge.
Now, this case is funny, man, because this guy was out on bond, and as you heard from the prosecutor or district attorney, whatever you want to call him earlier, it said that the wife's story has changed a few times, right? So who's to say, and this is all hearsay, who's to say that when he was on bond, didn't go out there and influence the old lady to say something else? You know, this is just one of those situations, even the courtroom knows that it could get dirty because it's his wife. You know, it might have been her brother too, but it's also the love of her life. So it's gonna be a tricky case. So that's more than likely why they took the plea deal route, right? Anyways, this guy was out on bond, and he probably hasn't seen any jail time for these charges yet, and he thinks wholeheartedly that he's probably going to go home on probation. You hear his attorney fighting for that. So when guys like this get sentenced, you never know what's going to happen, you know, because they just ain't ready for it.
I would ask that you sentence him to probation today. I know that Mr. Ball has a few words that he'd like to say also.
Mr. Spano, thank you. Mr. Ball, would you like to be heard? Please, yes.
Oh, man, what's Mr. Ball got to say?
On July 4th, 2017, in our home, there was
He's going to have a hard time in prison, Bobo.
chaos, some violence, and above all, a tragedy. For the last 5 years, we have all been wrestling with the question of culpability on the one hand and mitigation on the other. Mr. Spano and Mr. Fitzpatrick, to their credit, have come to the conclusion that the ultimate decision in this case must be made here, this afternoon, by this court, under the conditions that they have agreed with the court to be implemented. Again, Judge, that was a morning of incredible chaos, but in the most general terms, there were a few very serious physical confrontations in the house. There was a period of time when my wife, Lori, and my brother-in-law, Chris, went outside to see if things would cool down and she could drive Chris home. I was trying to make preparations for what might happen next. There came a time when Chris came back into the house with Lori, trying to hold him back, and it was at that time when I shot Chris. When I appeared in front of the court in December, I told the court that I acted unreasonably and I was responsible for Chris's death.
Don't do it,
My
buddy.
conscientious belief is that the responsibility lies with me because I should have used that time to contact the police.
Yup.
The police should have been called to my house before Chris was shot and not after, and that is the basis of my guilt, and that is what I live with. Damn.
What? What'd you say?
People often say in the aftermath of a tragedy, they are going to live with that tragedy for the rest of their lives.
Bad.
I live every minute of my life in regret and guilt. Regret and guilt that Chris lost his life under these circumstances. Regret and guilt and the impact of this tragedy on the Ross family.
This guy's going through it, man.
Excuse me.
During your lifetime, Mr. Ball, you've cut a fine path for yourself and your family. You've served your country, received an honorable discharge from the United States Navy.
Damn.
You've served your community. You're very well regarded, now retired school teacher and youth coach.
Wow.
You've been a source of comfort and respect for your family, who quite clearly remain loyal to you. You're held in very high regard by friends, by fellow teachers, by your neighbors, by students. There's no question about that either. I have absolutely no doubt that you are remorseful. No doubt. You clearly were under extreme duress that morning. And as we all know, alcohol and guns are never a good combination.
No, it's not.
There were alternatives available, which you now acknowledge. Unfortunately and tragically, those alternatives were not used. And what appears to the court to be left is two devastated and divided families, left only with pain and grief in common, with no easy repair in sight. I'm sorry for everyone's loss. And Mr. Fitzpatrick was right when he initially said, none of us want to be here today. None of us.
Get the buffalo skin chair there.
Taking all these unique circumstances into account, as a result of your plea of guilty to manslaughter in the second degree, The sentence is that of an indeterminate sentence of imprisonment of 2 to 6 years. The minimum is 2, the maximum is 6. There was a waiver of appeal at the time your client entered.
Here we go. Bailiffs, get to work.
There's a 20 surcharge.
Dude, don't let me see you. Tighten up. Try those tears before you get out to D Block Cell 222. They're waiting for you with the Brillo pad, mop man. Oh, man. Poor fella. Shouldn't have used a gun, man. Even though you got beat up, should have got a gun.
Jim, extended deployment. You're on extended deployment, man.
I love you.
No, he ain't. His ass going to the penitentiary, big dog. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you enjoyed and learned a few things along the way. And I don't know if I said it in the video or not, but this guy got sentenced in New York. And y'all know all about them treacherous ass New York stories on my channel. But you just never know, man. When, even in your own house and you're a square from here to kingdom come, you've done everything right in your whole life, you're in the military, it doesn't matter, man. If you decide to pick up a gun and take someone's life, chances are you're going to be going through the courtroom and then your life will be at stake. But that's just my 2 cents, you know? Anyways, let me know your 2 cents in the comments section below. I'd love to hear it. Check out all the links in the description of the video. Go add me up on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Check out my second channel, 23-on-1. Me and Brittany stream live there every single day. And as always, I salute every last one of you who've been supporting me since the beginning. And everybody who's just now joining the lockdown compound. Y'all be easy, be safe, and stay free.
It leaves a beat.